morning, good morning, good morning.
Good
Dr.
morning.
Dr. Lene Le Roux. We are so excited to have you on here this morning, and I wanted to discuss the topic that we're discussing today for ages and just get to chat to you as well. My first question that I want to know, we're going to dive straight into it, is just how are you doing in a very busy season, both the end of the year season, but also your season in life? You're a professional woman with young children. How are you doing?
Oh, busy, busy. We're really heading into the crazy season in terms of things at work, schools, holidays, festivities, down staffing for the holidays. So there is so much to do, but doing well. I'm really enjoying this phase, actually. I'm loving my kids at the moment. They're just very, very cute. And even though I don't get to spend as much time with them as I wish, I'm enjoying the balance of working and mothering, I must say. It's been a good year.
Ah, and that is so good to hear. And I know a lot of mums are feeling the opposite. They're feeling frazzled and overwhelmed. And so that's
Yes.
incredible that you're
Yeah.
managing it all.
Well, there are lots of frazzled, overwhelmed moments in between, and lots of frazzled, overwhelmed moments, but also just really good. I think when you love what you do and what you're doing at home, it just makes it a little bit easier to get through those moments. But and I know that I'm in a very fortunate position to be able to do that. So, yeah, good.
Amazing. Well, also with a lot of hard work. So well done on you
Mm,
as well. Dr.
thanks.
Lene, so you are a GP who specializes in women's health, particularly for mums, and you also have a very special interest in ADHD and women with ADHD. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how your interests kind of happened and moved along the way.
Yeah, so I think when I trained to be a doctor, we had some rotations in mental health as students. I always enjoyed them the most. And then when I was placed for my community service here, I was actually placed at a psychiatric hospital that looked at after adults with intellectual disabilities as well as other mental health conditions, so often bipolar, schizophrenia, autism, etc. Lots of ADHD. And then I was moved straight into the registrar program at UCT and started doing my postgrad studies in psychiatry. And then my own journey took like a little bit of a wobble. I had my daughter, who was a very wanted pregnancy and baby, but I struggled with postpartum depression from that pregnancy. And so I moved out of the sort of more academic system and moved into GP practice and decided I am going to focus on mental health, only see mental health patients, and with a special interest in women. So I love working with moms and women going through perimenopause, menopause, pregnancy, the whole range. And ADHD is one of those things that I think has just been so much development in the last few years. It's just been
Mm.
interesting to stay up to date with it. There's been amazing conferences in South Africa. We're actually hosting the International ADHD Conference in Cape Town in 2027. So we've been a lot more involved in that community and attending all those talks, and it's just kind of grown to an interest point of mine. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I'm feeling like it's also a topic that's just spoken about so much more. And
Mhm.
I mean, I know you're also part of our boss mom groups, and we sit around those tables, and it is coming up more and more. These questions about whether somebody has ADHD, people, mums in general, just struggling. And I guess that's where my first question on the topic of ADHD is. I think a lot of us, well, it's seen as like this invisible thing when it comes to women in particular. And a lot of the education that we were given as kids is that you have to be hyperactive to be labeled as this ADHD person. How has that progressed? And what are some signs now in a woman particularly that you could be considered as ADHD?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why women have been missed, sort of historically in terms of ADHD diagnosis, is because we miss the inattentive subtype of ADHD often, and that's boys and girls, but often the girls have inattentive ADHD, or they're just masking so strongly that they're able to get through school. And then when university hits and there's a lot more pressure and a lot more stuff, and they go into work, and everything's overwhelming, and there's not that sort of very strict structure and rules to follow and to hand in your homework and get it signed off, then often the signs are coming, out at that point, and then people look back and think, oh my goodness, this has actually been something I've struggled with since I was in primary school, but because I had 4,000 lists and little labels and color coded, and I was, an A-type personality and anxious to perform, I was able to kind of push through that. So the ADHD picture we sometimes have in our head is like those typical very hyperactive boys that are bouncing off the walls, they're talking too much in class, they're getting into trouble, going to the naughty corner. And that's not often how girls present. We do have girls that also present with the sort of hyperactivity side, but often it's the girls that are just quiet in class. They're sometimes daydreaming or doodling. They're not getting their work done in class, so they're taking home lots of homework. Those girls are often missed because they'll put in the effort and they'll put in the hours and they'll kind of push through it for a long time. But in adult women, what we're seeing is presenting with, all sorts of features of inattention. And that's not just for sitting at work, focusing on a work project or drafting an email. It's also in conversation. Are they paying true attention in a conversation? Are they being, forgetting details all the time? People keep saying to them, listen, but I spoke to you about this. Like, how can you not remember this? You're late for whatever because we said 6 o'clock and you've arrived at 7. So it's the inattention in those small details in conversation that's often missed, but also things like leaving things unfinished, starting a task and walking away and just forgetting about it, or taking on lots of new hobbies and projects and never quite finishing them, or putting them off until the very last minute when there's so much pressure and you can't manage, other than to hand it in the next day. And then it's kind of done with a lot of stress night before, not sleeping. We also see it with sleep disorders. So we often see women presenting with insomnia. And when you take a thorough history, it's because their brains are so busy at night that they actually can't fall asleep. They are still thinking, partially because the ADHD wasn't managed well during the day. And so all the work is now punched at the end of the day and kind of overwhelmed with that. But also just because the brain is just very, very busy. We see people losing things often, losing their phones, losing their keys, can't remember where I put stuff. Those are all symptoms of inattention that are features of ADHD.
And on that note, I mean, you talk about inattention, and as you're talking, I'm noticing so many of these characteristics in myself or in friends. But how do we know when you compare? Because also a mum's life is just so busy. I have
Hmm.
3 children. I have 3 different schools, different pickups, different sports times. Like there is
Hmm.
just a lot going on. I'm also a business owner. So how do we differentiate between, okay, this is just a chaotic season of life,
Hmm.
um, postpartum, brain fog, hormones, things like that are possible. And how do we differentiate that kind of ADHD brain compared to really being diagnosed with ADHD?
It's such an important thing to speak about because I think there's so much on social media at the moment, lots of available, info available with ChatGPT, and people are self-diagnosing ADHD quite a lot based on what they're experiencing in this very busy season where there is chaos and there are lots of things going on, and it's easy to become distracted by your very, very busy routine. But when we make a formal diagnosis of ADHD, you actually have to meet criteria for ADHD before the age of 12. And so even when we diagnose an adult, we are going back in their history all the way to school and we're going, what was it like for you sitting in class? Were you often sort of drifting away, daydreaming? Did you lose everything? Like, was your mom on your case the whole time because you've left 30 jerseys at home this year and you've lost the shoes? And, it has to be something that has been present throughout life and that possibly is just now not able to be managed anymore by all the coping mechanisms that are often put in place. So people with ADHD are great at coping. They put in lots of sort of self-coping mechanisms without even knowing that they have ADHD. And it's things like making lots of lists, having calendars, having, putting all the structure in place that they possibly can, exercising a lot. But sometimes a phase of life like motherhood, where the demand then is much higher than your coping mechanisms can last for, we start seeing it becoming dysfunctional. And we have to see that there's dysfunction in 2 or more areas of your life to make a diagnosis of ADHD. So, for example, a marriage is struggling because the wife is extremely irritable, overwhelmed, emotionally dysregulated at the end of the day, forgetting everything she needs to be doing, late for
Mm.
everything that needs to be done, and they're sort of interrupting partners, blurting out things, impulsive spending, addiction, all of those kind of things can present in your social setting. It's got nothing to do with how long you can sit in front of your computer and work. So that's just one aspect of it, is getting focused for work. But we take a proper history and we make sure that you're meeting criteria before the age of 12 and that it's causing current dysfunction in more than one area of your life. And only then would we make a diagnosis of ADHD.
Totally. I actually got goosebumps when you spoke about that because that's something that I've actually never thought about, and how something like ADHD affects different areas of your life. Because you do think, when you think about it, okay, it's just with work. Um,
Mm,
but as you say, there's so many coping mechanisms too. And if we've been learning this, particularly as women, to mask it for
mhm,
so long, you've learned these coping mechanisms. You've learned to write it 20 times in your diary and on your work calendar and here.
mhm,
You've learned to make the lists and re-go through the lists. But that effect on your relationships is
mm,
so huge with someone with a bit more impulse control and that is overwhelmed. I'd
mm,
love to chat about that a bit because I don't think that people do speak enough about that, about the effect on our relationships, both. And I mean, as
mm,
mums, we have our role as a mum, as a wife, as a friend, our
mm.
relationship to ourselves and self-care. So what are some of the things that we're seeing in ADH women and their relationships?
So I often actually see adults because their spouse has brought them to see me. And it can be a male spouse or a female spouse that
Mm,
bring their partner and they're like, something is not right here. I actually cannot live with this person anymore. They are driving me insane.
yeah.
Because everything is disorganized. You know, they'll sit till 10, 12 o'clock at night working because they haven't done their work in the day. We don't get to spend time together. So it often affects just that evening portion of family time, you know, where you want to be sitting with your spouse having dinner, but you've still got a ton of stuff on your plate. You haven't finished your task. You've procrastinated everything till the last minute. And then things, simple things like just being ready to leave the house on time, being able to get everything together in a peaceful way to get out the house on time.
Mm,
Yes, it's chaos with kids. I mean, they will not put on their shoes, no matter how many times you say put on your shoes. But it's different from the mom not being, or the dad not being able to actually get it all together themselves.
mm,
And then the emotional dysregulation with ADHD is something that isn't often spoken about. And it's that irritability, snappiness going from 0 to 100. And that's the same pathway as impulsivity around spending, drugs, that kind of thing. It's
yeah.
dopamine driven. And that's how we understand ADHD, that it's largely dopamine and noradrenaline driven. And dopamine is what assigns reward to where there should be some reward. So, like, I see something cool and beautiful. Oh, my dopamine spikes. And that's
Mm,
supposed to happen for the right things. When there's reward sort of incorrectly being placed on things, your emotional reaction is sometimes very strong and dopamine driven, and frontal lobe, which is like that fast reaction based, instead of like, oh, I can think through the situation logically, calmly, and then have a response. So there's that 0 to 100 sort of dysregulation in mood. And that can look like a mom at the end of the day just breaking out in tears, or it can be the shouting, screaming, throwing things. That's all impulsivity that we see with ADHD, and that impacts relationship. You know, the men will often say, "I actually cannot say anything to her because she will just explode," and it's
mm,
because mom's been masking the
wow.
whole day. She's been
Yeah.
trying to keep it all together. Now it's a very hard time of the day for anybody with ADHD because there's now tons of stimulation on back of fatigue,
Mm,
and hubby's come home, and you just kind of at the end of your tether. And a lot of moms feel that way. But again, we need to know it's been there since before the age of 12. We have dysfunction in more than one area and they are meeting DSM criteria. So having that sort of dysregulation and overwhelm in the afternoons is a very mom thing as well. But it's about the
mm.
degree to which it affects your functioning and your life.
And I want to chat about self-diagnosis, first getting a proper diagnosis. We've actually chatted about this again in our boss mom group, because it's quite expensive to go through a process of getting
Mhm,
diagnosed. And as you've mentioned,
mhm,
you know, you do have to do a full history. But what are the harms of self-diagnosis if you are just a mum that is overwhelmed, that's feeling, okay, I probably have ADHD? Would you
mhm.
recommend that we self-diagnose or that we actually go for a proper diagnosis, and how can that help us then move forward? And something, sorry, before I let you answer that, something before I forget that you're talking about with, like, in terms of relationships. I
Mm,
can imagine just that understanding can really help both partners because
mm.
it becomes a completely different conversation. So anyway, I'm going to leave that there.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why I actually like it when the spouse comes to the
Yeah.
appointment, because as I'm going through the questions and the criteria and kind of discussing how that's impacting, they're like, "Oh my word, they do that. Yes, they do this all the time. Yes, they do this. Oh, okay. It's not because they're a bad, lazy person. It's because they just actually can't get that, together for that day. So it's actually very helpful in terms of just educating partners, making sure that they
Mm.
understand, because it's something difficult to manage. I mean, the fact that people manage till that point is already, it's exhausting. So we're having your partner on board, understanding the diagnosis, knowing what management of that looks like, knowing how your brain just works differently, and having that understanding can really help. But to get back to self-diagnosis, I think there is a big movement towards self-diagnosis, and there's a lot of people presenting to me saying, "Look, I've done the online checklist. I have ADHD. I'm here to discuss what I can do about it." And then when we do the history and the things that they've ticked on the self-diagnosis checklists and things that you can rating scales and those sort of things, yes, they are, there are features of ADHD, but everybody has a little bit of neurodiversity, right? So everybody's brain works a little bit differently. There's not enough always to actually validate it being a diagnosis. And the harm in that is that we often miss things like anxiety disorders then, because somebody that's anxious is also very restless, racing thoughts, staying up at night, not being able to sleep. The symptoms can overlap immensely. And then we miss things like a mood disorder, anxiety, etc., because there's self-labeling of ADHD. People go to a GP that really just has like 10 minutes to see them quickly, get a script for Ritalin because they've been diagnosed, and then, we actually miss what's going on. And in that case, stimulants actually worsen the rest of the mental health picture. The other thing is if you're using stimulants like Ritalin without an actual diagnosis of ADHD and you don't have the condition, it actually doesn't improve your cognitive functioning at all. So they've done studies looking at students particularly because, there's like a culture in students, go get your 10
Mm-hmm.
milligram short-acting Ritalin from your buddy down the hall. Everybody quickly pops a
Mm-hmm.
Ritalin at night and they study, right? It's a big thing. But they looked at those cognitive enhancing sort of features of the medication. And for people without ADHD, they actually didn't improve their functioning. They think they did because they could sit there like zoned in for 4 hours and study and get
Yeah.
through the whole textbook and go write the exam the next day thinking they've done everything. But then they actually can't recall, or the structure in their stuff is incorrect. If they've taken one the morning before they write, the structure of their essays are incorrect. They've actually highlighted the wrong thing. So it actually
Wow.
worsens your outcome if you use it as a cognitive enhancer if you don't have ADHD. So it is important to get a real diagnosis, to get a proper, assessment done.
Mm.
There's many ways of going about that. There are occupational therapists who do ADHD assessments now. Educational psychologists are the people that traditionally did the initial testing because they do the testing in children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very different for a child than an adult because a child, you have to make sure that there's no learning disabilities,
Mm.
dyslexia, other things that are contributing to the ADHD picture because those need different intervention. Whereas with adults, those things would mostly have come out by the time somebody's done with school. And so, we can just look at the ADHD. And then GPs can diagnose ADHD. So the idea would there to be, book with a GP that's got a special interest in ADHD diagnosis that's able to give you a longer appointment. It is a lot more affordable than going through like a 6 hour EdPsych assessment
Mm-hmm.
or neuropsych assessment. So there's ways around that big cost at the beginning. Um, ADHD is a very costly thing to have as well. So ADHD costs, your personal life, the things we've been discussing, self-esteem, your work performance is affected. So the amount of money you're going to earn over a period of time is going to be affected to some degree. We end up seeing people having very big accidents, injuries, that kind of thing, because they're not attending properly. And the cost of that to people and society is way higher than kind of having that assessment done, which is, I think, why there's so much movement in the government system at the moment and advocating for proper assessments for people within the government space and medication availability in the government space. Because if you treat it properly, you're actually saving a lot of money
Yeah.
otherwise. But there's such a hurdle to getting the diagnosis because of waiting times and the cost of these appointments because they're long. Yeah.
That's so true, though. And again, just something that you don't consider with the information that we've been told. And I mean, I remember as a kid sitting in class and like it was Ritalin time, and the naughty little boys scurried up to the front of
Mm-hmm.
the class, took their Ritalin. There was a huge stigma around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that more and more people are talking about it. And as I mean, as mums, we talk about still our children and the amount
Mm-hmm.
of children that we're noticing have neurodiversities or just like different needs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important, I think, as mums, as people, to chat more about this.
Yeah.
And the idea of self-esteem, particularly as women, I want to highlight that as well. And how have you seen, and this idea kind of going from a place where your brain just functions a little bit
Mm,
differently to
mm.
self-esteem, guilt, self-love, and I think a big one also like trust in yourself. What patterns have you seen in women with ADHD with those things?
There's almost always when we screen for that, there's clear, very, very deep difficulty with self-esteem, self-worth, guilt,
Mm.
because there's been a lot of failure. Often, there's so much trying, there's so much effort being put in, there's so much, the masking is sort of like a buzzword at the moment, but other than the masking, the actual work that's put into to be able to achieve at the level your job requires, to have a business and to branch out with things, to manage your responsibilities at home, and work, all of those things are impacted by ADHD. And when you do fail then at those things, or you do struggle with them a lot more than other people, of course that's going to affect your self-esteem.
Mm.
Why is X, Y, and Z able to do all of this and manage it so well? I try really hard, and my afternoon always ends up as a mess. And more than that, people lose their jobs. They get fired. They don't meet deadlines. They're in performance review. They're constantly being told, you're not doing what you need to be doing. You're not meeting our standards. You're not meeting, what you needed for this point in your performance plan. And that affects self-worth immensely. There is a sense of failure. The oldest patient I've diagnosed with ADHD was a 72-year-old man. And he
Wow.
came to me because his grandchild had been diagnosed with inattentive ADHD. His then daughter, who gave birth to that grandchild, was then diagnosed with inattentive ADHD. And then he was said, but this is like my life too. And he sat crying on my couch because he had every single
Oh.
feature. He had never held down a job. He couldn't support his family at all. He kept losing job after job after job, moving from one position, other roles. It was just he basically felt his whole life was a failure, and that he failed his wife and he failed his kids. And it was simply because he was inattentive and it wasn't picked up. And we started him on medication. And he is now working as a carpenter, doing these beautiful furniture pieces for people, and actually able to work throughout the day. And now he's found purpose and meaning. But the tears were about why at 72 has this only been made clear? It explains everything in my life, my relationships with my kids, my spouse. Yeah, and that's sad.
Oh.
Like, that's why we talk about it now, and we try and get people on board, because it's not, just those naughty little boys in class, and they're not naughty, they
Mm.
are dysregulated. They're,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Oh.
saw a patient yesterday whose teacher was tying his legs to his school desk in class. Honestly, with elastic bands tying his
Mm.
legs to his school desk so that he can stop getting up in class. That's how people with ADHD used to be taught,
Wow.
Now it's so much different. There are wobble cushions and little strings for them to play with, and there's body breaks. The boys go out and play
Exactly.
in the middle of a lesson to get them all busy and get their energy out. There's so much that can be done now. It's not just about like the stigma of the Ritalin child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate when I said naughty little boys, I'm saying that was the belief back then,
Yes, no, yes,
and I
I
do
understood
feel
that.
like it's changed a huge amount just around education and hopefully also mums speaking to their children about it, whether they do have ADHD or not. If they
Yeah.
are, I don't know if the kids are going up anymore and the teachers are handing them out. But just kind of fixing that stigma about it,
Mm.
that they're not naughty, they are dysregulated. There is a little bit of a
Mm.
neurodiversity. And Dr. Lene, I want to chat about, I mean, the main thing is solutions. You have
Mhm.
mentioned Ritalin. Do you recommend everybody with ADHD goes on Ritalin, or is it just if you walk us through that? Who should be on Ritalin? And then if not Ritalin, what else can we be doing to help navigate, yeah, this neurodiversity?
It's such a individualized treatment plan. When we work with adults, it's very different to children. So children will often need like the occupational therapy input, sometimes some speech therapy, that kind of thing to help with other things, assistance with teaching, accommodations at school. There's lots of stuff that can be done in terms of making the classroom an easier space for them and giving them a lot of support. They
Hmm.
often do need the stimulant on board. Luckily, we don't just have Ritalin anymore. We've got lots of other things that can be used. There are other stimulants on the market now that we're using in children that don't cause that sort of like zombie feeling some kids have, that don't cause the severe appetite suppression and all the side effects that we were worried about. So there is more available. A stimulant is still gold standard treatment for ADHD because we know it just improves things more than anything else. But with adults, especially, there's so many lifestyle things that can be done. There's so many alternative types of therapy that can be done to support someone with an ADHD brain. So when we see someone, we'll assess first for emotional, things as well, depression, anxiety, ADHD, and make sure that we're not missing anything else. Do the blood work, make sure there's no iron deficiency. That's why you can't concentrate. All of those things get done first. But then we often refer to ADHD coaches who are sometimes educational psychologists with a background in ADHD, who then put, coaching programs together to give you tools, how to structure your day when you have ADHD, how to structure your work week. What is the ideal work for you actually to be doing? Maybe a desk job doing admin all day is not for you. Maybe something more creative, something that allows you to get active and busy and, work practically. OTs do the same thing. So, well, not the same thing. They will knock me off if I say they do the same thing as a psychologist. I know they're very different, but OTs can also do ADHD coaching. And so then they will help with functioning in different areas of your life as well. So functioning, again, not just work function. We're looking at social functioning, occupational functioning, family functioning, social functioning within the community. They help to structure your life in a way that your brain works well at. And that's not one size fits all. That's not like ChatGPT, give me a routine for someone with an ADHD brain, and these are my symptoms and my job. No, it needs to be trial and error. There's a lot of trial and error with ADHD management. Oh, if I do exercise in the morning, I actually find I can focus in the morning for 3 hours. Then in the afternoon, I hit a slump. It doesn't help when I exercise there. Some people find, yes, I go lift weights quickly for 20 minutes, I'm back, I can focus again. So there's all of those little practical things. Addressing diet. There's a movement away from exclusion diets. It was a very big trend a few years ago. We now have got lots more evidence coming out on diet, and we're actually looking at just a healthy Mediterranean diet that has enough stable sugars throughout the day so that we're not going up and down in terms of sugar. So there's all these practical things that can be put in place. And because an adult's demand on their life differs in different areas of life, at different phases of life, it's also going to change as to how you manage it. Yes, I'm a student adult now. I need to be studying 12 hours a day. Might need a bit of a stimulant in addition to all the lifestyle stuff. Okay, I've been settled in my job for 10 years. I can do this like without thinking twice. I know exactly what I'm doing. My systems are in place. Things are organized. I've got a great assistant who knows how I like things, etc. Maybe I don't need my stimulant for a while. So it's also not sort of one plan and that's what you go with. It changes as your phases of your life as an adult change.
Dr. Lene, that is all just so amazing and so much to think about. And I know that there are going to be so many mums that listen to this that realize that they need help, they need assistance. Where can they find you? What is your role with a mum? What's your favorite part of it? When do you kind of then see them off to somebody else? Let us know, what our next steps are if you are someone that kind of resonates with this conversation and realizes that this has been a big part of your life, whether it is your relationships or your work or things are suffering. Where do they start?
So we're based in Claremont. I have a practice with 3 doctors, sometimes 4. We've got an extra 4th doctor that comes in now and then, John, who comes and helps us out when we're very busy. And we do ADHD assessments in an hour's time. So it's a conversation form of assessment. So we chat, just like we've been chatting now. It's a conversation. Bring the spouse if you want to, and we just go step by step through the assessment process in an hour. When we manage things, we manage the medical side of it, as well as all the lifestyle things, the supplements, making sure that you're using evidence-based supplements instead of sort of anything that's marketed as something for concentration. So all of that gets done. But then we often refer off to an ADHD coach, whether it's an OT, an ed psych, a neuropsychologist with an interest in ADHD, to do those practical interventions. Sometimes we use coaches, mom coaches, to just help put the lifestyle stuff in place around the routine and structure of motherhood, which is such a unique part of ADHD management. Managing an ADHD mother, that it's multifaceted and everything needs to be looked at. It's really not just about like take a pill and see how things go.
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely make use of other team members. We use psychologists as well when we feel like there is a lot of lack of self-esteem, worthlessness, a lot of guilt, things that are built up over a lifetime or just, a few years of struggling with this. Because counseling can really help process that, kind of find that strength again. Like, actually, I need to be gentle with myself. I wasn't lazy and useless and stupid. I was brilliant, but I just couldn't concentrate. And kind of processing that with a psychologist can also be really helpful.
Thank you. Dr. Lene, thank you for having this conversation, for opening this conversation. I know you're also active on social media, where I'll share your link as well in the description.
Mhm.
But just thank you for your role that you're playing in mums' lives and families' lives and changing the conversation and the narrative about mental health and ADHD and all the things that come with that. So a huge thank you for being part of that. Um,
A
and, la-
pleasure.
and ladies and mums, thank you for listening. If this does resonate with you, please do contact Dr. Lene. I think that it's such an important thing to get on top of, whether it is just lifestyle changes or medical route, whatever it is. I fully believe that you guys in your practice can help. So please do reach out for help. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful week. And we will chat soon. Thank you again, Dr. Lene Le
Bye.
Roux.
Pleasure. Pleasure,
Bye.
pleasure. Bye.